nose. Can you point to her little nose?
Home safe. For Adele and Christian Petty, their relief is palpable.
So hair's off.
Adele and her baby were left fighting for their lives after a problematic pregnancy and a traumatic birth. Their care, they claim, compromised by COVID. Adele was just over 8 months pregnant when she had such serious pain she was admitted to hospital. But after testing positive for COVID, she says she was sent straight home to isolate. The pain only escalated. A week later, they called an ambulance, but because of the positive test, were told it wouldn't come until she spoke to a consultant.
I couldn't wait, and Christian dropped me at the door, and I had to get myself up to the ward, but I was sort of hunched over, holding. I was in quite a lot of pain, and then that's when really, for me, the care became really bad. I was cannulated and sort of left in my own mess. I felt lonely, I was terrified.
Adele says the midwife wouldn't come into the room. At times, unable to stand, she said staff wouldn't help her put on her clothes. And when she asked for a wheelchair, she says they refused.
They said, oh no, you can't have a wheelchair, you have to walk because we don't want to have to clean it after you've used it. And that was the first time I rang Christian, and I was just crying because I just said, I can't believe how I'm being treated. I said, I honestly feel like vermin. I said, they're treating me so badly.
And you were in no doubt that that was because you had tested positive for COVID?
Absolutely. I have to say not all the staff. I did have a few lovely midwives through it.
Adele says there was confusion about how to treat her as a COVID-positive woman. On the second night, the midwife told her she was still in so much pain she could stay. But Adele told us, as she was getting ready for bed, another came in to tell her she had to go home.
You can't be here, we need the bed, you're being a bed blocker. And I was like, I'm totally taken back by this. She came in the room, she was very abrupt. I was sort of like, whoa, like I don't really understand what's going on. She said, you need to go home. She said, I've got someone else waiting for your bed.
Christian says when she came through the door, he could barely believe what he saw.
I was angry. She came in pretty much exactly how she was walking into hospital, hobbling, in not pain. And now she's been sent back to me.
Christian is in no doubt that not being allowed to be with his wife meant she was sent home prematurely after both admissions to hospital, her pain still severe and not properly diagnosed.
I could have been there saying, no, we can't go home like this.
Yeah.
Just to change how it all played out.
And it was to play out in the most traumatic of ways when a few days later, Adele, still only 35 weeks pregnant and in excruciating pain, again had to return to the hospital.
Christian was sent away. Even though I was in such a state, they said, you can't be here, you need to leave. And he was asked to leave, and I just looked at him and I said, do not leave this car park. Because I knew, I said, do not leave.
Before Christian even got back down to the car park, the hospital had called to say his wife was being rushed to theatre. He says the first time he realised the baby had been born is when he saw her in the operating room being given CPR.
I saw Cece on the table and I was like, hold on a minute, she's been born, she's there, why is she not screaming, and what is that woman doing to her?
Cece didn't breathe for 9 minutes. She was sent to an intensive care unit at another hospital. Adele was also seriously ill. She'd lost almost 3 litres of blood.
It was like 20 minutes, so I was just, sorry. I just didn't know whether it was ever going to come back, or it was just really hard. And me personally, I think it could have been avoided.
As Adele was so unwell, she couldn't be moved to be with her baby. And because of the COVID restrictions, Christian says he wasn't allowed to visit either. The couple didn't see the baby for the first 6 days of her life.
You just feel robbed. You feel absolutely robbed. I feel robbed of the first moments of her life. You're pining for your child.
I know it's unprecedented times. It's just, we just want them to learn, just to think about it more compassionately.
Christian Petty talking to me earlier. And King's College Hospital NHS Foundation Trust told us, we're very sorry that Mr and Mrs Petty were unhappy with the standard of care they received. We're currently investigating their case and it wouldn't be appropriate to comment further until that investigation has concluded. Well, joining me now are Maria Booker from Birthrights, a group which campaigns for better maternity care, and Jill Walton, who's Chief Executive of the Royal College of Midwives. Thanks, both of you, for joining us. Maria Booker from Birthrights, I mean, obviously this is an acutely distressing case still being investigated, but what are women telling you about their experience of care during this pandemic?
Well, we've heard from a lot of women over the last few months, and obviously at Birthrights we tend to hear that the worst cases, and the women and individuals contacting us have ranged from feeling anxious and concerned to desperate and devastated, I would say. We've heard stories of women and families being separated, as happened in Adele and Christian's case. We've heard of women being told that their baby has died at a scan without anybody to hold their hand. We've heard about dads sleeping in a bike shed in a hospital car park so that they are not too far away from their partner. We've heard about women who've had a traumatic birth and who've had to deal with a sick baby on their own on the postnatal ward without support. And we've heard quite a lot of women who've taken the decision to birth without assistance in order to ensure that their family isn't separated.
Now, the guidance from NHS England around some of these issues was changed very, very recently in December to really press hospitals to make sure that pregnant women were not alone and were allowed to have a partner supporting them throughout the whole pregnancy and in the birth. Why isn't that enough for you?
So it's really important to say that the guidance has always been clear throughout that a woman shouldn't be alone during the labour and birth itself. And that's been clear from the outset. But we were really pleased that the NHS guidance issued in December made it clear that partners weren't visitors, they were an essential part of safe and personalised care, and that they should be let back into all parts of maternity care as well. So now it's a matter of implementing that guidance, and unfortunately it was published just at a time when the COVID cases were surging and hospitals were again dealing with many more COVID cases. But we really urge trusts and hospitals to bear in mind that restricting visiting in maternity services and changing services does real harm as well, and that needs to be balanced against the needs of controlling the spread of coronavirus.
Jill Warner, we know from the campaign group Pregnant Then Screwed, from a SNAP survey they did, they just released the figures to us today of 2,000 women, that trusts already are pushing back against that guidance, warning women that partners may not be able to be present. Are you happy with that?
I agree with everything that Maria says about it's really important that women have their partners or a supporter with them during labour and birth, and we absolutely support that. These are unprecedented times, and that story that we've just heard is really distressing, and I do know of the distressing stories as well. Midwives find it difficult, but ultimately it's about keeping everybody safe. So that's the midwives and the maternity team's responsibility to keep women, other patients in the hospital, and also the staff safe. Coronavirus is something that has caught us all unawares, and we have to think very carefully about how we provide care in order to keep everybody that we're caring for safe. I think the most important thing is the local risk assessments. Every service is different, every level of coronavirus is different around the country. It's really important that local services and the women they're caring for know what's happening in their local service.
And that, sorry to interrupt you, but presumably that's why the Royal College of Midwives refused to sort of fully endorse that NHS guidance, because are you saying that you want midwives on the ground to be able to make the decision?
I want midwives to be able to make the risk assessment so that they can keep the women safe. We also really want individual women to have the risk assessment with the midwife. So if women have lost a baby or they're really sick, that actually it's about making sure that they have their partners with them, and that can be facilitated. But again, going back to what Maria said, it's really important that women in labour and at birth have somebody with them. But that is really, really important.
Really briefly, if you would, isn't there an issue that if it is left to individual midwives. And we saw in Adele's case, she felt individual midwives had different views on how to respond to the COVID issue. Isn't there a danger that what you end up with is a very piecemeal service, that women can't be sure what service they will get, what promises will be made to them?
It's not about individual midwives, it's individual services, because they're all different. So it's about making sure that's very clearly communicated to the women so they know what to expect. But midwives and women should be talking to each other so that there's a very clear understanding, so that women having babies during the pandemic do not worry about what's going to happen to them. And we do know that lots of women have had really good experiences despite the restrictions.
On that note, that women should not worry. I know both of you shaking your head there. Thanks very much for joining us.